that was fascinating. I, if everybody's the same as me, that was hypnotic. The thoughts and the ideas and the analyses that go behind all of that were amazing. Very good indeed. Um, I'll open it up for questions in the audience. Anybody got any questions? I've got loads, but Barry.
The blue stones, I mean, is there as much controversy over the stones from Preseli as there are the ones that you've talked about?
The search for the source of the blue stones, again, I mean, it's difficult. I can be very critical because I'm not a big fan of kind of incremental science. And a lot of the groups that are looking at the blue stones have kind of they've gone about it in I guess, a very different way to how I would. So what we did was we went for the approach of, can we analyse across a possible area and then see if we detect a match? The way that a lot of the work on the bluestones has developed has been, we think it's this hilltop in the Preseli Hills. Do the data match that site? Then, oh no, they don't. Well, maybe it's this hilltop in the Preseli Hills. Oh no, they don't. And every time they publish a paper on it. And you have this long chain of papers that are kind of incrementally developing an argument. And so far, I think there's probably at least 20 sites that have been identified where bluestones could have come from. So we're at this kind of level where we haven't actually got much agreement, and we've got this very bizarre iterative process of knowledge development. We've had the story of, you might have seen it a couple of years back, 2-3 years back, about, and I can't pronounce the name of it, but the site with the stone circle that was believed to have been partly excavated and thought had been dismantled and moved to Stonehenge. Stories like that come out that don't help, because subsequently that idea has been completely trashed, that it was a stone circle. So it's really complex, actually. I still don't think that anybody's really got to the heart of exactly where those bluestones come from, except it probably was the Preselis. Because there's a particular type of dolerite called spotted dolerites that are present at Stonehenge, and they're quite unusual in the British continent. I think the next nearest ones are in Scotland. But now this Scotland argument's out there, who knows? But I mean, if I were doing it, I'd do it a very different way. And that what I would do personally, these in the Preseli areas, there's a whole range of, I think there's 3 or 4 big igneous sills in that area. So they're all tilted, so they're nearly vertical, and they run in lines. They create lines of hills. What I would do would be I would sample along those hills really systematically, and I'd also sample across the sills to see if there's any variability across their thickness, and then I'd compare it to material from Stonehenge.
I thought they actually found the site from they could see where they were cut.
Yeah, they have. There's a lot of debate about that as well, in the fact that actually what it looks like is a perfectly natural fracture on a dolerite sill. So Mike Parker Pearson has done this. I've worked with Mike on this sarsen work, so I've got nothing but admiration for Mike, but I think he might be over-egging that a little bit. I looked at it. There's definitely evidence of quarrying and prehistoric quarrying in that area, but I think when you stand there and go, this is the face that it came from, I thought that was stretching it a little bit personally. Because it looks just like how a dolerite would fracture. Yeah, because it's in kind of columns and it breaks off as very nice bluestone-sized chunks. And it was all a little bit convenient for me personally. That's a personal view. I keep saying it's a personal view. So,
are you sure that all the sarsens have come from the same site?
No, they definitely haven't. So I think what we think is that of the ones that are still on the sites, that's the 52 that are left, we think that 50 of them probably have come from West Woods. Yeah? There's these other 2 that have got this very different chemistry to that main grouping of the ones at West Woods, and we don't know where they're from. and as I say, probably never will. But that's another 2 locations because they're different to each other in terms of chemistry and to the main cluster. So that's probably 2 other sites. We've done other work, and I did think about talking about this, but it starts getting really quite complex to explain. We did work where we looked at some of the debris that's been excavated from the Sarsens. So where they've excavated at Stonehenge, the archaeological excavations are full of sarsen, understandably, because they probably dressed the stones in those areas. They were probably cleaned up initially and brought to the site and then cleaned up more. So you find lots and lots of chipping debris. There's one site actually near the avenue that comes in from the northeast where arguably, it looks pretty convincing, there's almost like a ghost of a sarsen within the archaeological site. So you can actually see lots of chippings, and there's this kind of big sarsen-shaped gap where there aren't chippings. And you look at it and think, there could have been a stone there. They could have dressed it, and it's all the bits have dropped off around the outside. And that particular site, we've linked out some of the debris to a place called Monkton Down, which is on top of the Marlborough Downs. So that's possible. That could be a 3rd site. It could be a 4th site, because we don't know whether those stones that we don't know where they're from, one of those could have been from Monkton. But, you know, there's a mixture. I think there's one dominant one, but there's other stones brought in from other areas as well, if that answers your question there.
Closely at your point of origin in terms of, I mean, it's now full of the detritus from 3,000 years.
Yes.
Since the quarrying out of the
Yeah,
stone.
yeah.
Have you got any evidence that there was quarrying there?
That's something we're trying to get some money to do. So one thing we would love to do would be to do some LiDAR analysis, you know, where you can, LiDAR is an airborne remote sensing technique that gives you real high precision topographic data. And in theory, it should be possible to detect pits in that area, in theory. I say in theory because West Woods was the centre in the late 19th century of a sarsen industry. So they were actually digging up sarsens, and an awful lot of them are under the A4. They were used as road base. Horrific. So there are lots of holes in West Woods, yeah? So the challenge is going to be distinguishing between recent ones and prehistoric ones. Now, I think that they'll have dug them out in different ways, because for the roadstone people, they weren't bothered about getting the stone out intact. They dug a pit around the outside of it and then chopped it, broke it up in situ, took the pieces out. So they may look very different. You might expect them to be more steep-sided, the recent ones. But that's something we really want to do, and then do some excavations if we do find any hollows, because they should be there. The other confusing thing is it's now a forest, so there'll be all sorts of root throws, and yeah, it's not going to be an easy thing to do, I don't think.
We need to wrap this up.
Yeah.
I do want to ask just 2 questions. One is, these are obviously, you started off when you were describing things, these are big beasts.
Yes.
How common are, I mean, do you find stones that big everywhere?
Not anymore. So the biggest stones on the Marlborough Downs are probably now about 4 meters long. There are no big stones on the Marlborough Downs.
So,
or in West Woods.
Is one of the reasons that these could have all mostly come from the same place, because that's where the big stones
possibly
were,
yeah,
and that they just weren't big enough elsewhere.
Possibly.
For, there's one over there, we'll use that one.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, someone or a group of people clearly had a vision for this monument. Yeah, they kind of knew what they were building.
Yeah.
And you can tell that because Stonehenge is actually on a slight slope, but the top of it, the lintels are level, which is amazing. Yes. And they actually chose sarsens and sited them, so they got slightly longer ones for the downslope side and buried the top. Yeah, it was really, really amazing bit of engineering. And then they did all the mortise and tenon work and put the lintel stones on top. But it is pretty much horizontal. So it clearly was a very, very deliberate thing. And someone was saying, yeah, we need that big one.
Yeah, yeah. My other question was, which you probably won't be able to answer, because of everything you've just said about not taking enough samples and that sort of stuff, is how you talk about Westwards as an area,
Yeah,
but actually your picture showed that there are lots of Sarsens all around that,
Yeah.
along that ridge and all that
Yeah.
sort of stuff. So
Yeah.
fundamental question is, how big an area is that chemistry cover,
yeah.
and how does it change as you go away from where you've taken your
Yeah,
own sample?
that's a really, really good question. So there's some things we know. We know that, so that Westwards is just south of the River Kennet on
Yeah.
a plateau surface. We know that all the sites on the other side of the Kennet, which are maybe within a couple of kilometres, have a very different signature.
Yeah.
So it's quite a short change there. We also know, so just to the west of where we sampled is the source of what would have been Lockeridge Dean, which was that came off the plateau top just to the west of Westwoods, and those stones would have all made their way down slope.
Yeah.
So we know that the signature can't go too far to the west, within a couple of kilometres. It's got to be that kind of an area. If you go further east, you go into the Savanac Forest, and then you start getting into actual outcrops of tertiary Neogene, well, Paleogene age sediments there.
Yeah.
There aren't many Sarsens in that area. The big unknown is south for us, and we don't know how far south that signature might extend, and that's Mike Pitts's criticism
Yeah.
of us. It's really interesting. I say there weren't big Sarsens on Salisbury Plain, and my argument is if there were, where are they all? Because were they all But that's a pretty good chance, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
That there were 80 of them there and they've all been used. And there weren't any tiddlers around. Because if you go to the Marlborough Downs, there's a mix of sizes and you get smaller bits. And why aren't all of the farm buildings and walls and churches and whatever else full of Sarsen, like they are in Marlborough?
Yeah.
You go around Marlborough, it's Sarsen World. It's like, theme park. Every building's full of them. Wouldn't make a very exciting theme park. I know I'd pay, but yeah. Where are they all? That's my question. There are a few. There's definitely some Sarsens around, but not great big clusters of them. You need a lot. And if you've got 80 big ones, you'd expect at least, 4 or 5 times the number of small ones. Where are they all? That's one of my arguments. Yeah. So.
Okay, let's
Yeah.
wrap it up there. That was amazing. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.